The CEO laughed when I drove my old truck, but his smile faded when he saw my company name on the deal. I had one chance to prove I wasn't the janitor. Richard Kane laughed so hard he bent over, his hand on his stomach like the world's funniest joke had just been delivered. I stood there in my 1995 Ford pickup, faded paint, mismatched hubcaps, rust creeping along the wheel wells like ivy on an old building. Behind him, his entire executive team snickered. We were in the Kane Systems parking lot, and I had just pulled up for what was supposed to be the meeting that would save my company. "You sure you're in the right place?" Richard called out, wiping tears from his eyes. "The janitor's meeting is next door." His people erupted in laughter that echoed across the lot. I didn't say anything. I just grabbed my briefcase, locked my truck, and walked toward the building. "My name is Marcus Cole. I run Cole Dynamics, a small but innovative logistics tech company that I'd built from nothing over the past 8 years. We specialized in advanced fleet management systems using cutting-edge AI. Our software could revolutionize how companies tracked and optimized their vehicles. I knew it. The government knew it. Richard Kane apparently only knew how to judge people by what they drove. The boardroom was exactly what I expected. All glass and chrome and expensive abstract art that probably cost more than my truck was worth. Richard sat at the head of the table like a king, wearing a suit that probably cost $3,000. I wore my usual, plain button-down shirt, dark jeans, work boots. His team was already seated, laptops open, ready to tear apart whatever pitch I was about to give. "So," Richard said, leaning back in his chair, "you're the small-time operation looking for a partnership." I nodded and connected my laptop to their presentation system. For the next 15 minutes, I walked them through everything. The software architecture, the AI algorithms, the performance metrics, the scalability potential. I showed them real data from real clients who had increased their fleet efficiency by 40%. Richard didn't even look at the screen. He checked his watch twice, yawned once, and then held up his hand. "That's enough. We don't partner with small-time operations, Marcus. We acquire technology or we develop it in-house. We don't play house with garage startups." My chest tightened, but I kept my expression neutral. I gathered my papers slowly, deliberately. Then I looked directly at Richard. "You might want to remember that name someday, Cole Dynamics. You really might. If you're enjoying this story so far, please take a moment to like this story, and also hit the subscribe button to get notified of our new series." I left the building with my dignity intact but my company on life support. Cole Dynamics was hemorrhaging money. We had enough runway for maybe 3 more months of operations. I'd been counting on this partnership with Kane Systems to change everything. Richard's rejection wasn't just a business loss. It felt personal. He hadn't even tried to understand what I was offering. He judged me in 30 seconds based on my truck and my humble appearance. As I drove back to my small office in an industrial park on the east side of town, my phone rang. It was Bradley, my business partner. "How'd it go?" he asked hopefully. "It didn't. Richard Kane is an arrogant fool who can't see opportunity even when it walks into his boardroom." Bradley went silent. "That's bad, Marcus. Really bad." I knew. What I didn't know was that Richard had just made a decision that would cost him everything. That same afternoon, he called one of our smaller investors and convinced them to back out of a crucial partnership. He did it out of spite, out of that toxic combination of arrogance and insecurity that makes some powerful men cruel. He wanted to make sure Cole Dynamics failed. He didn't realize he was lighting a match that would burn down his own house. That night, I sat in my apartment above my office, looking at a framed photo of my father. He'd been a mechanic his entire life, worked with his hands, never cared what people thought about his grease-stained clothes or his beat-up vehicles. Before he died 5 years ago, he told me something I'd never forgotten. "Marcus, never measure a man's worth by the shine on his shoes. Measure him by the strength of his character." My father didn't make much money, but he made a difference. He taught me that real power doesn't come from appearances. It comes from competence and integrity. That's why I drove the old truck. Not because I couldn't afford a new car. I could. But because the truck represented something to me. It reminded me of who I was and where I came from, kept me grounded. That night, I opened my laptop and started drafting. Not a desperate email to Richard. Not a plea to any other venture capitalists. I drafted something entirely different. I had been playing small because I was afraid. But looking at my father's photograph, I realized something. I didn't need Richard Kane's permission or partnership. I had something he desperately wanted. And now I was going to make him realize what he'd lost. Coal Dynamics held a patent on something extremely valuable. Proprietary AI logistics software that could integrate with any fleet system and predict maintenance issues before they happened. This technology had taken me 7 years to develop, working nights and weekends while running the business. It was genuinely revolutionary. But here's what Richard Kane didn't know. Or rather, here's what he wanted very badly to not know. Kane Systems had been trying to replicate our technology for 3 years. They'd hired data scientists and engineers, spent millions, and still couldn't match our capabilities. They were close, but not close enough. And they didn't know that I knew they'd been trying. I had contacts inside their company. Good people who'd called to warn me that Richard had specifically tasked a team with reverse engineering Coal Dynamics' approach. That's what made them so desperate. And desperation, I was learning, could be weaponized. I made a phone call to someone I knew in the government technology board. We'd met at a conference years ago, and he'd stayed in touch, genuinely interested in our progress. I'm calling because something big is coming, I told him. A government fleet optimization contract. It'll be massive. And I want to make sure you know Coal Dynamics has exactly what you're looking for. The call came on a Tuesday morning. It was the government tech board. The call I'd been waiting for. Mr. Cole, we're putting together specifications for a $1 billion federal logistics contract. Your software keeps coming up in our research. We'd like to discuss integration licensing. My hands actually shook as I wrote down the details. This was it. This was the moment everything could change. But here's what made it even better. There's one complication, the board member said. Another major tech corporation, Kane Systems, has also applied for this contract. But their proposal relies on technology they don't actually own. According to our preliminary review, they'd need to integrate third-party software to meet the requirements. Do you know who makes that software? I smiled. I do. It's us. Within 48 hours, Kane Systems reached out to Coal Dynamics. Not Richard. He was too proud for that. An intermediary, a smooth-talking VP named Marcus, approached Bradley with a proposal. We'd like to discuss a licensing agreement, he said, for your fleet optimization software. Bradley called me immediately. It's happening, Marcus. They're desperate. What do we do? I thought about Richard's laugh. I thought about his dismissive wave. I thought about the investor he'd stolen from us. We say yes, I told Bradley. But we do this smart. I created a pseudonym for my involvement, E. Cole, Director of Operations. I communicated through email using carefully neutral language. I wanted Kane Systems to need our technology so badly that they wouldn't think twice about who was actually behind Coal Dynamics. I wanted them comfortable and unprepared for what was coming. The second meeting with Kane Systems took place in a different boardroom, this time with me attending as an outside consultant on the licensing agreement. I drove my truck again. I wore the same plain clothes, and I sat quietly in the back of the room while my legal team and their executives negotiated terms. Richard was there. He looked right through me. In his mind, I was probably just some junior consultant, maybe from a law firm or a tech support company. He had no idea the person he'd mocked in the parking lot was sitting 15 feet away, watching him squirm about performance metrics and integration timelines. We need this software operational within 60 days, Richard said, tapping the table impatiently. We have a government contract at stake. I almost smiled. You have no idea, I thought. This is about to get intense. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. What Richard didn't know was that I'd already done my homework. And what I'd discovered was devastating. Kane Systems had been falsifying performance data to win government contracts. Not just a little bit of creative accounting either. We're talking fabricated benchmark results, inflated efficiency metrics, and completely made-up client testimonials. It was systemic fraud. I knew this because I'd had a conversation with one of their senior engineers, a woman named Amani who'd reached out to me privately. She was horrified by what Richard was doing and had slipped me copies of internal reports showing the false data. "He doesn't care if it works," she told me. "He just cares if it looks good enough to fool the government inspectors." So I had a choice. I could complete the licensing deal and let Kane Systems integrate our legitimate technology with their fraudulent data. Or I could expose them. But I wanted something more. I wanted Richard to understand what he'd done to me wasn't just a business rejection. It was a failure to see someone's true value. And I wanted him to learn that lesson in the most public way possible. That's when I realized my software could do something brilliant. Could verify data integrity in real time. Which meant when Kane Systems tried to present those false metrics in front of the government inspectors, the system would flag them automatically. It would expose everything. I worked with my tech team for 3 weeks, designing the final integration protocol. The beauty of it was that it looked completely normal. It appeared to be a standard security measure, which it was. But what Richard didn't understand was that his own lies were going to destroy him. I scheduled my government presentation for the exact same week as Kane Systems' final pitch to the federal board. 2 competing proposals. One built on innovation and truth. One built on arrogance and fraud. I was calm. I was ready. And I couldn't wait to see Richard's face when he realized what had just happened. The night before my presentation, I sat in my truck in the parking lot of my office building and looked at my father's photo again. "Tomorrow," I whispered. "Tomorrow I show him what real power looks like." The waiting lobby of the government building was crowded with executives from both companies. Richard spotted me walking in and actually laughed out loud. Here I was, in my same old truck clothes, looking like I'd just come from a construction site. He called out loud enough for everyone to hear. "Still chasing scraps, old truck boy? Shouldn't you be getting back to your garage?" His team tittered nervously. I walked past him, stopped, and turned back. I looked him directly in the eyes and said quietly, "Scraps feed the hungry, Richard. Greed feeds nothing." Then I walked into the presentation room. His face had shifted. There was something in my eyes he didn't recognize. A certainty. A power that had nothing to do with appearances. Richard's presentation was flawless on the surface. Flashy graphics, confident delivery, impressive performance numbers. He walked the government officials through his proposed system integration, showing them metrics that looked absolutely stellar. 98% efficiency improvement. 95% maintenance prediction accuracy. Cost savings of $40 million annually. It was all lies and it was all beautiful. Then he started his live demonstration. He wanted to show real data integration happening in real time. He pulled up his test system, connected it to his database, and initiated the protocol. That's when everything changed. His slideshow started glitching. Numbers began correcting themselves in real time. Red error flags appeared across his dashboard. The beautiful fraud was exposing itself. Richard's face went pale. He started clicking frantically, trying to stop what was happening. But he couldn't. My software was doing exactly what it was designed to do, verify integrity. Every false number was being flagged. Every inflated metric was being corrected. The room had gone completely silent except for the sound of his keyboard clicks. Richard was sweating now. He was trying to explain away the errors, claiming it was a system glitch, blaming his team, doing everything except taking responsibility. Then one of the government officials asked the question I'd been waiting for. "Who designed the verification system that's currently running your integration protocol?" Richard started stammering. I stood up from my seat in the back of the room. "That would be me," I said. "Cole Dynamics proprietary integrity verification software. I designed it specifically to prevent exactly this kind of data falsification in government contracts." The room erupted. Richard's face went from pale to completely gray. He was staring at me like I'd just risen from the dead. And maybe I had. Maybe the person he'd mocked in the parking lot, the one he'd dismissed as a janitor, was rising right then. The government officials were already conferring with each other. One of them looked at me and said, "Mr. Cole, we'd like to hear your proposal now." My presentation took 45 minutes. I showed them real data from real clients. I demonstrated our genuine efficiency metrics. I explained the technology honestly, including its limitations. I answered every question directly and admitted what we didn't know. By the end, the room understood that Kane Systems' entire proposal was built on fabricated data. And they understood that Coal Dynamics was offering them real, verifiable technology that actually worked. News travels fast in the tech world. Within 6 hours, every major business publication had the story. Kane Systems' CEO caught presenting fraudulent data to federal officials. The headlines spread across tech blogs, industry newsletters, and business news sites. Coal Dynamics went from unknown startup to industry darling overnight. Our software was suddenly the most talked about technology in fleet optimization. Investors who'd rejected me before were now calling. Media outlets wanted interviews. And Richard's world was collapsing in real time. Kane Systems board called an emergency meeting the next day. Richard tried to spin the story, claiming it was a system error and miscommunication with his team. But the board wasn't stupid. They reviewed the internal emails, saw the falsified reports, and understood exactly what had happened. They also understood that their stock was about to tank and their reputation was destroyed. Investors started pulling out. Major clients sent termination notices. Within 48 hours, Kane Systems went from a thriving corporation to a company in freefall. And I got a call on my personal phone. Richard's number. "Marcus, we need to talk." His voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the panic underneath. "I think we can work something out here. Name your price. I'll buy Coal Dynamics. 50 million, 60 million, whatever you want." I smiled but didn't answer immediately. Then I said, "You can't buy this, Richard. It's not for sale. But I do have one condition." We met in a neutral conference room at a hotel downtown. Richard looked diminished. His expensive suit couldn't hide the stress, the worry lines, the dawning realization that his empire was crumbling. "What's your condition?" he asked. I leaned back in my chair. "You resign from Kane Systems. Immediately. Voluntarily. In a public statement, you admit to authorizing fraudulent data submissions and take full responsibility." His face turned red. "Absolutely not. I built that company from nothing. I'm not going to." "Then we're done here." I stood up to leave. "Your board is already discussing replacing you anyway. At least this way you get to make the choice." Richard grabbed my arm. "You're destroying me," he hissed. "You're actually destroying me." I looked at him coldly. "You did that yourself. I'm just holding up a mirror." Richard refused. He fought the board, hired lawyers, tried everything to hold on to his position. But it didn't matter. He'd already lost. The board voted to suspend him pending investigation. The federal government filed charges. And Richard's attempts to fight only made things worse for him. He gave interviews claiming I was jealous, that I'd orchestrated everything out of spite, that I was ruthless and vindictive. Every accusation just added fuel to the fire. The narrative had already been written. Arrogant CEO takes down his own company through fraud. Humble small business owner exposes the corruption. It was a story everyone wanted to believe because it was true. Then the real destruction began. Someone leaked Richard's emails to the media. Internal memos revealed conversations about manipulating data. Voice recordings of him mocking employees surfaced. Fraudulent invoices appeared. Years of manipulation and dishonesty poured out into the public eye. The news cycle devoured him alive. Within 2 weeks, Richard Kane went from powerful CEO to international symbol of corporate greed and dishonesty. I could have claimed responsibility for the leaks, but I didn't need to. I'd worked with Amani, the engineer who'd first come to me with evidence of the fraud, to organize a coordinated whistleblower submission. She and others on Richard's team had sent everything to journalists, the SEC, and the federal government. I hadn't leaked anything. I just made sure the truth had a pathway to the public. That was the difference between Richard and me. He'd destroyed people to climb higher. I'd simply stepped aside and let truth do what truth does. Richard's face appeared on the cover of national business magazines. Not as a success story, as a cautionary tale. as an example of everything wrong with corporate leadership. His wife left him. His children stopped taking his calls. His country club membership was revoked. Everything he'd built his identity on, status, wealth, power, evaporated in weeks. If you're captivated by how Ethan's crushing his enemies, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Kane Systems stock crashed 70% in 3 days. Major investors pulled out. The company's board initiated a formal investigation. Richard was arrested on federal fraud charges and released on bail. He couldn't go anywhere without media following him, couldn't attend any event without being recognized as the disgraced CEO. His reputation wasn't just damaged. It was obliterated. Every search engine that brought up his name connected him to fraud, corruption, and arrogance. He'd spent his entire life building a persona of success and sophistication. Now that persona was synonymous with crime. The board of Kane Systems made a decision. They wanted Coal Dynamics to lead the restructuring. They called me directly and offered a partnership. Coal Dynamics would assume control of Kane Systems' tech operations, and Kane Systems would become a subsidiary under our management. It was everything I'd dreamed of: power, legitimacy, industry recognition. But there was something more satisfying. I was being offered this because I'd earned it. Not because of political maneuvering. Not because of arrogance. But because I'd solved a problem that mattered. I accepted the partnership with one major change. Coal Dynamics would acquire Kane Systems' technology division completely. We wouldn't partner with them. We would absorb them, restructure them, and rebuild them according to our values. The board agreed instantly. They were desperate for someone to save the company's reputation and salvage what they could. And I was about to become more powerful than Richard had ever been. The difference was, I didn't need the expensive suit or the arrogant attitude to prove it. I just needed the track record. I just needed the integrity. I just needed the results. When the acquisition papers were finalized, I was offered a position. CEO of the combined entity. I accepted. The headline read, Coal Dynamics acquires Kane Systems in historic restructuring deal. For the first time in my professional life, my name was as prominent as Richard's. But unlike his prominence, mine was built on something solid. 21. I drove my truck to Kane Systems headquarters on my first day as the new leader of their tech operations. The security guard at the gate actually stepped back. Maybe he recognized me. Maybe he didn't. But this time, as I pulled up to the building, employees stood and watched. There was no laughter. There was respect. I parked in the executive parking spot and walked inside. The lobby was different than I remembered. The expensive art still hung on the walls, but somehow it looked smaller now. Like nothing mattered except the work. Richard was waiting for me there, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. You didn't have to come here today, he said quietly. I'm not in charge anymore. You've won. I looked at him and felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction. Not joy. Just sadness. He'd been so capable of so much. Instead, he'd chosen arrogance. Let's talk in my office, I said. I had a choice in that moment. I could have crushed him further. I could have handed him a box and had security escort him out. I could have made it public and humiliating. Instead, I offered him something different. I'm not going to press charges, I told him as he sat in the chair across from what was now my desk. The government is, but I'm not. I'm also not going to press for maximum sentencing. You're going to resign from every board you're on, every position of influence you hold. You're going to acknowledge publicly that you committed fraud. And then you're going to disappear. Start over somewhere else. Be better. Richard looked confused. Why are you giving me a way out? I thought about my father. I thought about all the times he'd talked about grace and second chances. Because I'm not like you. Because character matters more than revenge. Because I want to prove that the right way to win is better than your way. I signed the acquisition papers and formally took control of Kane Systems operations. The company would be still practical, still humble, but more suitable for a CEO. But I kept the license plate. It read, Humble One. We did it, Dad. I whispered. We really did it. Not the way I expected, but the right way. I thought about that moment in the parking lot when Richard had laughed. I thought about how humiliated I'd felt, but I realized that humiliation had been a gift. It had shown me what kind of person I didn't want to become. It had pushed me toward something greater than revenge. It had pushed me toward real power, the kind that doesn't need to mock others to feel strong. A year later, I stood on the stage of the largest tech conference in the world. The spotlight felt warm, the crowd expectant. Below me in the front rows sat hundreds of tech entrepreneurs, CEOs, investors, and journalists. And in the back, sitting alone, was Richard Kane. He worked for a small consulting firm now, completely removed from the tech industry's elite circles. He'd taken my advice and started trying to be better. He'd been watching my career unfold with something I could only interpret as regret. I began my keynote speech with a simple story. A year ago, the CEO of a major corporation laughed at my truck. He didn't see a person. He saw appearance. He saw a vehicle that didn't match his standards. He laughed, and his team laughed, and for a moment I felt small. The audience was silent. But here's what he didn't know. He didn't know about my technology. He didn't know about my integrity. He didn't know that real power doesn't come from appearances. It comes from purpose. I looked directly at Richard. He looked away. They laughed at my truck, I continued. But they forgot. Real power doesn't need polish. It just needs purpose. It just needs truth. And it just needs patience. As I finished my speech, the entire audience stood. The applause was thunderous, genuine, overwhelming. And in that moment, I wasn't thinking about Richard Kane anymore. I was thinking about my father. About all the humble people who'd built real things through honest work. About the fact that character actually does matter. About the fact that sometimes the longest game is the one worth playing.